Hi, this is Seth David from the world-famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, bringing to you another special screencast. This time we're talking about modeling health insurance costs for small business in MS Excel. I know exactly how exciting that sounds. Knowledge is power. Make an impact by learning more. Call me right now at 866-945-8070 for information about private trainings. We record the live session with you so you can review it as often as you like afterwards. And don't forget to sign up for our upcoming webinar in January 2013 on MS Excel for accountants, bookkeepers, and business owners. Of course, if you're watching this and it's after January 2013, then the same link information provided in, on, and around the video and blog post will take you to a place where you can download the recording of that webinar for a low, low price. Now let's get into things. Hi, and welcome to another special screencast. This time we're going to do some more Excel work. And I've done a number of videos in the past on how to book payroll and on payroll modeling in Excel. And so we're going to kind of pick up where some of that leaves off, and I'll list the links to the videos that I'm referring to in the post on the description of the video on YouTube as well as the blog post. Do me a favor, and you see that cogwheel down at the bottom of this video on YouTube? Hover your mouse over there if the quality is not great and choose a higher resolution option so that you'll get a better quality result when you're watching this video. So, looking at the payroll model, first let's format this blank spreadsheet in my own sort of personal custom style. I like to sort of paint it gray, and then let's start out with some assumptions, because in a minute I'm going to list out some employees and I'm going to set up a timeline, right? And what I want to look at specifically is how to calculate your monthly health insurance cost on your employees. So the assumption that we have to come up with here to start with is, what is the cost per employee per month? So health insurance cost per employee, right? And let's just say that this cost is $450 a month. The way things are going, if it's not there, it probably will be soon. Now let's set up the timeline. We'll do it very simply. So I want to start with, let's just start with January 1st, 2012. And if I put at least one other month in there, highlight the whole range, and then I use my autofill to drag to the right, it will fill it out for me. And Excel figures out how I want to increment the range. The reason I prefer to do this still with a formula, though, is that done this way, if I want to change it and say, what if we want to start at December 1st, 2012, nothing updates, right? So I still prefer to do it with the formula. And how does that formula work? Equals date, open parentheses, we need the year of the previous cell, comma, the month of the previous cell plus 1, comma, the day of the previous cell. Okay, now if I copy that across, I have it done based on a formula so that I know I have a full year in here, and if I decide to change this to 12, or let's say I want to go 1/1/13, look what it does. Everything updates from there. If I wanted to do 12/1/12, it updates. So this is why this is my preferred way of getting the timeline in there. Now, control and the number 1, let's format these, make them look a little prettier. And what we're going to do is we're going to come over here into our fill, to our fill effects, and let's see what we can do here. And this is strictly a matter of personal preference and, you know, what you think looks good and works. The other thing I like to do, control 1 again, is when I'm starting with a date format, I can come down here to a custom format and then use the convention. Obviously the M refers to the month, the D the day, and the Y refers to the year. And basically you put in, you know, how you want this displayed. So rather than do it in numeric format like this, Excel, the beauty of this is Excel will read this in numeric format no matter what I put here. This is just what it looks like to the end user. So what I like to do is come in here and say, give me the 3-day version of the month, and you can see in the sample what that does. For December, it'll give you the December abbreviation, and then a space and a single quote and the double-digit year. So I have December 2012. And if I did 2 more, it figures that out. In that case, you wouldn't want the single quote. That doesn't really make sense. And you can do it without the single quote. Depends on your preference. Click OK, and of course it updates everything because I had the whole range highlighted when I did that. So now, let me add in a column here. And I'll just kind of create this little small column buffer. Over here I need the employee. So let's just call this employee 1. We'll do 5 employees. Not that it really matters. Total payroll. So this is going to be monthly payroll. Let's widen this up a bit. And again, going back to the formatting issue, there are things you can do here to, make this stand out. Like here are my assumptions. Normally I'd have this on a separate page altogether. But for this purpose here, I'm just going to keep it all in one place so you can see everything I'm doing. Now initially what I want to do is let's just put zeros everywhere. And one of the reasons I like to do this, especially when I'm doing a sort of financial modeling thing like this, is that I want to make sure it's clear that I didn't forget to put something there and that it was actually intentional, that there's nothing there. Now what I can do is let's fill in just what the monthly salaries might be. So let's say employee 1 gets $10,000 a month, employee 2 gets $3,000 a month, employee 3 $5,000, employee 4 $2,500, and employee 5 $250. Let's say it's a part-time employee. So now it seems like it should be pretty easy. Just count up the number of employees and multiply that by the 450. But here's where it gets challenging. Let's say employee 1 was not hired or won't be hired until March. So we zero these out. Okay. Then let's say employee 3 is let go in January. Okay, and then let's leave the others the same. So the challenge here is now I can't just count up the employees using this column, because the problem I have is that I need to accumulate only those that have a quantity here that's greater than 0. So if the quantity is 0, then I don't want to include it in the multiplier when I'm multiplying by 450. So we have to write the formula. Health insurance cost. Okay, so we need to write a formula that looks up in this range. And by the way, we're assuming here for the moment, this is the inheritance assumption, that people get insurance the minute they get hired. So that's something that we can factor in after the fact. The challenge on these things always is to get the basic formula written. Then we can expand on it. Once we have the formula written and working, the hard part is writing the part that looks at this and looks for the 0 values to figure out what not to include. So the challenge then is, in the second part, going to be to figure out how to take into account what the probationary period is. So something, it could be 30 days, it could be 3 months. So that's something we'll do afterwards. So now let's take a look at what this formula looks like. So essentially what I need to do is I need to count up the number of cells in here that don't have a 0 in it. So we're going to use a formula called COUNTIF. Now also, in order to make the formula writing part a little easier, what we're going to do is we're going to assign a name to this value here. Here's the assumptions description, and here's the value. So if I go to my formulas tab, I can go here to define name, and it looks at the label to the left and just kind of gives you a suggestion. And most of the times that's pretty much easy and worthwhile to go with. So I'll do that. So now I can refer to this cell by its name, health insurance cost per employee, with an underscore between each word. You can't have spaces in a defined name in Excel. So now that makes it a little easier when it comes time to multiply this. But the first objective is I want to get this to be able to count up not all of these, but 1, 2, 3, 4 of these, even though I've included the whole range. So in order to do that, we're going to use a formula called COUNTIF. Okay, so COUNTIF looks at a range, and then we specify the criteria for when something should be counted. So first is the range. That part's easy. I click and drag down here. And I want to include even this buffer down here so that if later on I go to insert something at this point, because I want to add new employees, I can do that and the formula will update accordingly. So COUNTIF, there's the range, comma. Now what's the criteria? The criteria is that it does not equal 0. And the way that works, the syntax, I can't really necessarily tell you why, but I have to put it in quotes and say does not equal, this is the symbol for does not equal 0, and close the quotes. And then I can close the range. And when I hit enter, it will give me a count of 5. And to test it, what I do is I come in here and I say, let's put this person's salary back in here. 10,000. It doesn't really matter. I can put a 1 in there, and it's going to be counted as long as it's not 0. So again, this goes back to why it's important to always have zeros in there, because if I don't include a 0, if I delete it, it's going to count it. So, you know, there's now 2 reasons why I think it's important to always include a 0 there. Now, what I want to do is, so far all it's doing is counting for me. Now I want to multiply that result by the health insurance cost. So let's hit an F2 to edit the formula. Hit the asterisk, not asterix, but asterisk. And then I can hit an F3, and that gives me any named ranges, any defined names. And the only one I have is the health insurance cost per employee. I select that, I hit OK, excuse me, and then I close the parentheses, and it's giving me a suggested correction. I actually didn't need to close the parentheses because I hadn't opened any. And now it gives me the calculation. It's taking that original result of 5 times the 450 to get me 2250. The nice thing about having the named range in there rather than an actual formula is I don't have to worry about using what do you call absolute versus relative referencing. I can copy this formula across now, and I know it's going to work. And the other thing I can do, if I feel it helps for modeling purposes, is to pull out the number of employees. And you're going to see why in a minute, and this is just going to be our COUNTIF formula again. Comma, quote, not equal to 0, close quote, close parenthesis. To extract that separately, then actually that makes this formula even easier to write, because now I can just say take this times the named range, copy that across, the result doesn't matter. But one of the reasons for doing this is to get into what I was referring to earlier about the next stage, which is what if our assumption is, what's the probationary period? And let's say it is 3 months. Now, this is the sort of thing that in my experience, especially as an accountant, doesn't usually change much. A company will have its policy and that policy will stay the same, and most companies do use about 90 days. So, given that, what we can do, theoretically, is assume that, and build the assumption right into the formula, in other words. So, instead of taking the count of employees in this month, we have to come up with a way to look for, are there any new employees, and did they show up 3 months ago, and are they still there? So that gets a little tricky to write the formula, even using a flat assumption. In other words, without making it so that I can change this in order to update the formula. And that, my friends, is something that I can't teach you in a short tutorial here, but I wanted to put it out there as food for thought for you, because it's something that's going to require some thought and planning in terms of the formula writing. But basically, I'll give you this. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get this formula here to look 3 months back and compare what's going on up here to what's going on in the previous month, and look for a specific change. And that specific change is, did anything go from 0 to something greater than 0 during that time period 3 months ago? If it did, then that's when you know somebody was just hired. Okay, and if that happened, if it went from 0 to a number 3 months ago, then that's when we want to start counting them in the cost of the health insurance. So again, this complicates matters, and it's not that easy of a formula to write. Of course, if you'd like to hire me privately to teach you how to do this, by all means, give me a call at 866-945-8070. And don't forget to sign up for our upcoming webinar in January on Microsoft Excel for Business. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me at 866-945-8070 or email me at seth@nerdenterprises.com. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you on the web.